I'm Roy Lee Lindsay with the North Carolina Pork Council, and I want everyone to remember bacon makes everything better.
For the victory lap, though. Whoa, whoa. They ain't never seen nothing.
It is football season in the old Norris State, and you're tuned in to the fifth quarter right here on the North Carolina Sports Network with Coach Jim Collins. I'm Mike Waddell. Man, I am really looking forward to talking football with you here on Mondays this fall on the North Carolina Sports Network.
No, it's an exciting time, Mike, and after 40 some years of doing this and being out of it for a year or so now, you know, I miss the thrill of being in training camp and heading up to the opening game and the excitement of all that, and you're looking at a lot of teams right now that are experiencing that excitement to go play somebody else, because let's face it, training camp gets old. You know, you get tired of going against the same guy. You've been going against him for 8 months, spring practice and the fall camp and the things that go along with that. So we all think we're pretty good right now, until you play somebody else, you really don't know where you are. And I'm going to use this example. The Florida State Seminoles really didn't know who they were until they played in Dublin, Ireland yesterday. And then they found out they may not be quite as good as they thought they were going to be. And the Georgia Tech Yellow Jacks may be better than all of us thought they could be.
Well, the thing that I liked about that game, and we're going to talk about that in almost every segment today as we go through today's show, we're going to talk about the coaching changes in North Carolina football. But when we start talking about rule changes, we're going to go back to that game from Saturday in Dublin, because you saw a 2-minute warning. You saw in-helmet communications, a lot of rule changes this year in football. But the one thing that never changes, Jim, it's a constant. It's a constant from the time that football was invented. You must be able to block. And if you cannot block, if you cannot protect your quarterback, it doesn't matter how many receivers or tight ends or running backs you have, because you can't get anything done. And Florida State went straight down the field in that first possession in Dublin, scored, then got the 2-point conversion. Everybody's thinking, man, this is going to be a rout. And then Georgia Tech just didn't even blink. They just went right down, got their 7 points, and then it was on. And in the trenches, it was an absolute whitewash by the guys wearing those white uniforms, Georgia Tech. You got to be really impressed with the fact that under their head coach, Brent Key, they are 5-0 against ranked opponents inside the Atlantic Coast Conference. And that was a big win on Saturday by Georgia Tech over Florida State, the previously 10th ranked team in the nation that is now the first ever 17th place team in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Georgia Tech's number one. You have 15 that are tied for second, and then in 17th place, you have the Florida State Seminoles.
That's an interesting way that you put that, but I think if you watch that game and you watch the post-game interview with Brent Key, and the question to him was about his offensive football team and the physicality of their offensive line, and his answer was one simple statement: run the ball. And that's what they can do. They can maintain possession of the football. They can run it. Their quarterback does an outstanding job of managing the game. And guess what, Mike? We watched the guy that played at Clemson. We watched the guy that played at Oregon State. And you know, I'm going to say this. I may piss some people off, but he's not good enough to manage the game all the time when it gets tight. He's not good enough.
DJ Uiagalelei 2 years ago in the ACC championship game in Charlotte. You were there?
I was there. I was on the sideline. Yeah, I was on the sideline.
And if DJU is playing in the second, third, and fourth quarter, North Carolina is the ACC champion. But Dabo pulled him, put in his current quarterback, and they win the game going away. Now, then DJU goes out. Uiagalelei goes to Oregon State, has a nice season, whatever, who cares? You know,
it's a different world out there, Michael. I'm going to tell you.
It's a different world. And then for some reason, Mike Norvell, who could have probably had his choice of anybody in the portal, brings a guy back to the ACC that had been benched in the ACC. And I don't think he played bad on Saturday. But I have to give credit to Georgia Tech and their defense. Their linebackers played well. They had guys wearing neck rolls. I mean, it was giving me,
Number
44.
Chills
from the 70s and 80s right there.
But you know what? You know what, Mike? The problem is I don't think he played bad either. And I should not dump on him quite as hard. But there were 3, maybe 4 critical throws that if you lead a receiver the right way, that the post route late in the game that was just slightly underthrown is a big play. So that when you get right down to it, there's 3 or 4 critical plays in a game, and the great ones make those. The ones that are not the great ones, they don't make those. They underthrow them, they overthrow them. You understand what I'm saying. I don't want to dump on him at this point in time. It's one game, and I think Georgia Tech's a lot better football team than what all of us think, because they can do one thing, Mike. They can run the football. They can run it. Yeah,
they do a really good job.
They're creative in the way they run it, and the quarterback manages the game outstandingly.
Man, it's not a Paul Johnson triple option, but no. I promise you, I'm watching Brent Key run the ball, as he said, and I'm getting some strange wing T vibes out of some of their formations. Not really a wing T, but the misdirection and the holding on to it's almost as frustrating as watching the Wake Forest teams from 4 and 3 years ago. Yeah. When they were doing that, because it's just like
with the long ride and all those things. Yeah.
Oh, it's brutal to watch, because you just don't know. And I can't imagine what it would be like. I guess you would know what it's like to prepare for that. But and that quarterback is not on anybody's radar, but he's got a big win. He's got a bigger win than anybody that was a quarterback at North Carolina the last 4 years, either one of those NFL guys in Hartman or May. They didn't win any big games. I mean, this nobody from Georgia Tech just got a win, and I think that could be a harbinger as to what we're going to look at here in 2024, Jim, because, everybody thinks it's always going to be Florida State and Clemson, and it's not. I mean, this year it could be Georgia Tech. It could be NC State. It could be Virginia Tech. It could be somebody completely different, and it could be Clemson or Florida State. Maybe North Carolina gets off to a great start Thursday night in Minneapolis. I don't know, but I tell you, it's going to be a lot of fun. We got to get moving to the second segment, so we're going to take a break right here. And when we come back, we're going to talk about all of the brand new rule changes in college football here in 2024. This is the fifth quarter. I am Mike Waddell. He's Jim Collins, and you're tuned in to the North Carolina Sports Network.
In sports, we talk a lot about impact players who make a positive difference. When it comes to our state's economy, the North Carolina pork industry is a true MVP. Each year, the pork industry plays an important role in supporting rural communities across our state. It contributes more than $10 billion a year to the North Carolina economy and supports more than 44,000 jobs. Learn more about their positive impact at ncpork.org. The North Carolina Pork Council, the foundational partner of the North Carolina Sports Network.
It's a brand new college football season here in the state of North Carolina, and we're here to cover it for you every Monday. This show will drop. It's called The Fifth Quarter, and it's right here on the North Carolina Sports Network, presented as always by our foundational partner, the North Carolina Pork Council. I'm Mike Waddell. He's the coach, Jim Collins, and a lot of coaches have gone on to different jobs out of the state of North Carolina in the offseason. And number one would be from a place where you spent a lot of years on the sidelines, and that's Duke University. Mike Elko has left. He's now at Texas A&M in the SEC and coming back to the ACC as a head coach is the former Miami head man. We're talking about Manny Diaz at Duke. Now, you know what it's like to coach at Duke. They've had back-to-back revolutionary coaches. And David Cutcliffe, one of our favorite guests, and one of your favorite people, mine as well. And also Coach Elko. In the short time there, a lot of positive energy about Blue Devil football. What does Manny Diaz bring to the table that can build on the Cutcliffe and Elko success?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Mike, and I'm not sure I have a very good answer for that. But Coach Cut built a tradition there that was carried over into what Mike Elko did, and they had really, really good players. I'm not quite as familiar as that with the personnel that they have now at this point in time. Manny's had a lot of really, really good jobs. Manny's been at some good places. And it'll be interesting to see what they can accomplish at a school that does not have quite the talent that some other people they're going to play has. And I think he'll do an outstanding job. Manny's a really, really good defensive football coach. So they will. I think it'll be a challenging year for them because they're not established at quarterback, and as you know, Mike, we've been through this many times in these years. You better have a quarterback that can play, or it's a huge issue. So the Blue Devils will be challenged, in my opinion.
I don't think Malik Murphy is going to be a Heisman Trophy winner, but the kid's an athlete, and he's durable. He can take a hit. That's something that Riley Leonard, when he got hurt last year for the Blue Devils, their season kind of, faltered a little bit. But when you look at what Malik Murphy can do as an athlete, and he really does seem to have a connection going back to when he was in a youth camp at Miami with Coach Diaz, this could be something that we want to watch. I'm not saying they're going to be a wonderkind team this year, but they too have a pretty soft early season schedule. So
they do. Yeah,
getting some confidence can make a difference. I like that. One of the things I've heard from the Duke people about Manny Diaz, people who have been around that program for a while, they say that the one thing that he does that's really special, his signature thing thus far in Durham with the Blue Devils, is that he doesn't sweat the small stuff. He just lets, it's like water off a duck's back. He just lets it go, and he's trying to take what he's learned in his roles at Penn State and at Miami and all the different places that he's coached, and really put that to work at Duke, because coaching at Duke is not like anywhere else he's ever been.
Well, let me say this, Mike. I exchanged a text with David Cutcliffe earlier this week, and as I looked at the current Duke team photo and in their blue jerseys, and then I looked above all the people in the white shirts that were coaches, analysts, GAs, et cetera. Well, guess what? The Blue Devils, through Mike Elko and now through Manny, they've decided they're going to spend a hell of a lot more money than they wanted to spend when David was there.
Oh, no doubt.
Because they all of a sudden understand, and I'm gonna be blunt when I say this now. They understand that their ass better be good, or they're going to get left out of this next transgression into college football. If you understand what I mean by that, I think you do. Yeah. So they've made a huge commitment to Manny. They made a huge commitment to Mike, and I think Manny is capable of being good. Just whether he can be good right away, I don't know. We'll find out.
And you talk about private schools that are going to spend some money. Brand new ACC member out of Dallas, SMU, Man, they're not. They might be spending about the same amount of money right now in the NIL era that Bobby Collins was spending back in the day when he had Craig James and Eric Dickerson back there in the Pony Express.
Yeah.
I know you remember that. But SMU is going to come to play. We'll talk about them more throughout our season here on the fifth quarter. Some other coaching changes here in the Old North State. Trey Lamb has left Gardner-Webb. He's off to East Tennessee State. Chris Reisert is the new head coach at Gardner-Webb. He comes to G-Dub after 13 years of coaching experience in Division I's, and most recently 5 seasons as the head coach at Tiffin University in Ohio, where he went 40-11 and won a great Midwest Conference championship with a record last year that was really strong and an overall record in conference play of 32-4. So knowing how to win, Jim, has to be something that the athletics director at Gardner-Webb, Andrew Goodrich, was looking for when he brought Reisert to Bowling Springs.
Well, there's no doubt. Your track record follows you. I mean, if you don't have success in your background, it's hard to move forward in this business, because this business is a success-oriented business. You better win if you want to move forward. If you can't win, it's hard to retain your position and grow in this business. So anytime you have a winning record and you can move forward, and I stated this earlier when Eric was on. I don't know much about that level right now. I'm looking forward to learning more about it. But I like a guy that comes in with a winning record and has shown that he knows how to move forward.
One guy that we also want to talk about is the new head coach at Lenoir-Rhyne, who was the top team in North Carolina last year, according to the North Carolina Football News Fabulous 14. This year, the North Carolina Sports Network is working with ncfootballnews.com to make it the Fabulous 15. And I know when we talk about with their publisher, Eric Lusk, we're going to learn about Doug Socha, who is the new head coach at Lenoir-Rhyne. Now, Mike Jacobs did a great job last year with the Bears out of Catawba County, but he's off to Mercer. And Socha now has been named the 24th head coach of the Bears. And I know a lot of the older fans that might be tuned into us remember when Lenoir-Rhyne won that national championship back in the 50s and very strong in the 60s under a guy named Clarence Stasnovich. Well, everybody's been chasing that ghost, including former Duke head coach Fred Goldsmith and Mike Houston, now the head coach at East Carolina. LR has a football mentality, but Socha is a guy that has gone 55-15 at Kaiser University and won an NAIA national championship in 2023. This guy can coach. And again, it's going to be fun not only to watch the top of college football in this state in terms of divisions, but to also look at that Division II area where we have 14 of the 34 active college football teams in North Carolina. I think Lenoir-Rhyne's going to be tough again. They just seem to reload there in the South Atlantic Conference.
I look forward to following that very closely, because that's my background as it is yours, Mike, from Elon to playing Catawba to playing Lenoir-Rhyne, Presbyterian, Newberry, et cetera, as you go through. And that's a program with a great history. And a little throwback in that is my first job coming out of college. I was hired at Greensboro Page High School by a gentleman by the name of Marion Kirby, who was the long snapper for the Lenoir-Rhyne Bears when they won the national championship back in the 60s. How about that? That's what a small world it is.
I love Lenoir-Rhyne. I grew up going to their games. My first game at Guilford was actually at College Field between the bricks in Hickory. And hopefully this year we're going to get up there for a game during this 2024 season. But right now we're going to step aside, come back on the other side of this timeout, and talk about the college football rule changes this year in the 2024 season as you're tuned in to the fifth quarter right here with Jim Collins and Mike Waddell on the North Carolina Sports Network.
If you are anywhere near Wilmington, North Carolina, and looking for a little live music, a cold beer, a tangy slushie, a fun crowd, or just a taste of the good life at the beach, Jimmy's Bar in Wrightsville Beach is the place for you. Located on North Lumina Avenue, just 1 block from the sand and waves of the Atlantic Ocean, Jimmy's features a full bar with nightly beer and drink specials, and it hosts musical performers almost every day of the year. One more fun fact, Jimmy's annual Children's Bike Drive, which started in 2017, now distributes more than 1,000 bicycles and helmets per year to young people in the Wilmington area and beyond. Jimmy's Bar, your home away from home on Lumina Avenue in Wrightsville Beach.
You're tuned into the fifth quarter here on the North Carolina Sports Network. Coming up in our next segment, we're going to talk about the Fabulous 15, a brand new segment that we'll have every week with you here on NCSN with the publisher of NorthCarolinaFootballNews.com. We're talking about Eric Lusk. That comes up in our next segment. But right now, Coach Jim Collins, we're going to talk about the rule changes in college football and what it means to the coaches and to the players. And the number one thing has got to be something that you and I had a chance to experiment with during our Alliance of American Football days, and you had it in the NFL as well. We're talking about in-helmet communication between the sidelines and the leaders on the field. And I have to ask you, last year, one of the biggest stories in college football was Connor Stallions at Michigan and stealing signs. Does this in-helmet communication eliminate that as something that people really need to worry about?
Well, Mike, I think it eliminates it to a degree, but I think the most interesting thing that I will follow as we move into this in the early stages are the no huddle teams. And what I mean is it's easy to use the helmet communication to get your initial call in. See if I'm an offensive play caller, to see the defense line up against the formation that I have, and then I can make a call. And then if they adjust, whether you're going to make a check at the line of scrimmage, and how are you going to make that check? Because obviously, as we all know, the helmet communication cuts off with 15 seconds to go on the clock. So at that point in time, are you going to go with the play that you have called for the no huddle teams? Are you going to signal another play to them? So I think as we go through this process for the hurry up teams, for the no huddle fastball teams, it'll be interesting to see how they handle this process.
One of the other new changes this year is the addition of a 2-minute warning in college football. And as you know, timing rules in the NCAA have really been shifting to line up more with the NFL in recent years. And now that shift takes another big step with the implementation of a 2-minute warning. How does that change a way that a coach will look to guide his team each game day?
Well, it gives you a built-in timeout is what it does. And so and depending on how many timeouts you've used in the second quarter or the fourth quarter, going into that 2-minute period, and not to correct you, Mike, but actually what they're referring to it, rather than a 2-minute warning, they're referring to it as a 2-minute timeout.
Right.
So it gives you the opportunity of an additional timeout that we haven't had in college football, that has been in pro football for a long time. So the strategy of how you handle that and how you handle clock management will be very important. Every college team and pro team in the country has a chart that says that whether you're on offense or whether you're on defense, that if a team has 3 timeouts, here's the opportunity for me to either take a knee or to move forward, especially at the end of a game. And so this just creates, if you haven't used a timeout in the second quarter, then you're holding at the 2-minute timeout, you're still holding 4 timeouts or 3 additional after that one. So it just grants you an additional timeout as you go through that process.
You're a defensive guy. You're one of the greatest linebacker coaches in Duke history and Florida history. You won a national championship in 1996. How do you coach defensive players when you continually challenge them by taking away different things. I mean, it's hard to play defense in college football here in 2024. And now the NCAA has updated their guidance on horse collar tackles. And that says now that when the defender grabs the ball carrier by the collar of their shoulder pads, that is a 15-yard personal foul penalty. And that will occur within the tackle box. And that's the space in the backfield between the two offensive tackles.
Mike, I think that's the key. Is now we've dealt with a horse collar tackle for a long time at this point in time, but it has not been within that tackle box, and people can't see me at this point in time. And I'm expanding my arms out, and I'm talking about that area between that tackle box. So that will be an interesting call league to league, whether it's the ACC, the SEC, the Big 12, or the Big 10, how they're going to interpret that call. So a lot of people don't realize this in college sports, in college football. I shouldn't say college sports, I should say college football. That the leagues, different leagues interpret rules, and they call rules differently than they do in other leagues. So it's going to be interesting to see how each league interprets that and how they apply it at this time. To be honest with you, I think it's a bullcrap rule that inside as a defensive football coach. Because when you're running the football inside and you're trying to make a play, you're trying to get the ball carrier on the ground any way you can. And I don't think there is a horse collar there. I think out in the open field, when you grab them by the back of the shoulder pads and all that, I think that's a legitimate call. Inside the tackle box, I think it's a bunch of crap.
Absolutely. We have three other minor rule changes. The addition of sideline tablets now can be used where you can show live video play on the sidelines and, engage your coaches and give some other people jobs to make these staffs balloon up a little bit more. You have a collaborative replay system, which is, wow, about time. That means that instead of having a replay booth set up in the stadium that takes the feed from the truck and sends it down to a screen about this big that some official has to look at, with, a big cloak around his head looking like a 1920s photographer, that they're going to go back like they do in a lot of the pro leagues now to a place at their conference office where they're all watching and they look at it in very big thing. And it's collaborative between the official in the conference office that's watching all the games and the guy on the field. And then the final one would be, I think, a complete and total waste of time. Now I have to talk to a coach in a sideline interview during the game. There is not a single coach in America that enjoys doing the sideline interviews as they go off at the end of the second quarter or come back at the end of halftime, but we still have to go through these things. Why do we need to have this? Is this just another way to bend the knee to television?
No, sure it is. They're spending all the money, Mike. It's called entertainment. We're entertaining the masses at this point in time. It's not so much about the players. It's about the fans that are sitting at home and not some ones in the stadium. The interesting thing is, if you watch the Florida State Georgia Tech game, I don't remember who the sideline reporter is, but she asked Mike Norvell a question, and he completely went off. She asked him about the goal line stand. He did not say one thing about the goal line stand at that point in time. He talked about their offense having to execute better at that. So, half the time your mind is not even thinking about what they're talking about. So it's a bunch of BS when you get down to it, and it's satisfying. It's satisfying the people that are watching out there.
That's Jim Collins. I'm Mike Waddell. When we come back for our final segment here in the fifth quarter for the opening week of college football season 2024, we're going to welcome in a brand new featured guest every week here on the fifth quarter. We're talking about Eric Lusk. He is the publisher of NCFootballNews.com, and that comes up next right here on the North Carolina Sports Network.
The original Salt Works has become a legendary breakfast, brunch, and lunch place in Wilmington for both locals and out-of-town visitors over the last 50-plus years. Our good friend Bob Hubbard owns the place, but he's also the one cooking your food and often roaming the dining room to greet you with a smile and to make sure your visit is a great one. Bob has been running the show at this unique roadside diner for more than 20 years now, and he and his friendly, hardworking staff aim to treat you like one of their own. Try Bob's homemade omelets or special recipe grits for breakfast or his legendary cheeseburgers for lunch. The Original Salt Works, your breakfast and lunch choice on Oleander Drive in Wilmington.
Welcome back into the fifth quarter show right here on the North Carolina Sports Network. I am Mike Waddell. The man in the middle is the coach, Jim Collins. And joining us at the far right of the Hollywood Squares right here is the publisher of the NCFootballNews.com website, the one and the only Eric Lusk, the man who knows more about North Carolina's 34 college football teams than any other person on the planet. And Coach, I tell you, we had a lot of fun last year doing this show, but it's impossible for us to keep up with 34 teams. But that's why we brought Eric into the mix. And Eric, how do you do it? How do you keep up with 34 different college football teams here in the Old North State?
Well, you don't sleep from about August to about September. You do a lot of research, you read, it is hard, especially on a game day. Last year, I get up all excited, and then by the end of the night, I was wiped trying to figure it all out. But, it's just like a treasure hunt. You just go searching and, talk to people. You follow the social media, and you just chase the stories. And, there's just it's a fascinating – we have a lot more football talent and tradition and legacy and stuff here than, I think a lot of people don't realize that. So
now, Jim is a graduate of Elon. I'm a graduate of Guilford College. We both played college football. You didn't play college football at North Carolina, but you're from an NC State family. So do you get any pressure from your family to be a Tar Heel when they're all wearing the red and white of NC State?
Right, absolutely. I grew up going to football games at Carter Finley from when I was, maybe 3 or 4 years old. A babysitter didn't show up on Saturday. They had to take me to the game. I was hooked. Went to Carolina for journalism school. I'm one of those weird people that, I love my school. I'm going to be true to my school. But, I do have, like, the past year following NC State was really magical. I lost my mom back in December. So for her to kind of, be around to see some of what they've been able to do, and it's, but yes, they do harass me. Anything that goes wrong, they'll point to that, Carolina education and stuff like that. So, yeah. So we've got really a mixed family. My sister started at State, went to Carolina. You have nieces and nephews that are split Carolina State. So that's what it's all about when you live around here. So
Eric Lusk joining us here on the fifth quarter show. He's the publisher of NCFootballNews.com. And one of the showcase features of this website is a segment called The Fabulous 14. And the North Carolina Sports Network will be one of the sponsors of this during the 2024 season. And Eric, last year, the number one team in North Carolina wasn't the Tar Heels or the Wolfpack. It was a little old team from Hickory, North Carolina, and Catawba County. We're talking about Mike Jacobs and his Lenoir-Rhyne Bears. But the Bears don't have Coach Jacobs anymore, one of the 6 college football coaching changes that we saw here in the Old North State last year. How do you see those coaching changes impacting the Fabulous 15?
Well, you said it, Lenoir-Rhyne, they lost Mike Jacobs. They lost several players, that followed him to Mercer. But they brought in a guy from, NAIA ranks he won a national championship. He started the program from absolute zero and built them up and brought him into Lenoir-Rhyne. So I don't expect them. They're going to be in a competitive conference, and, Wingate is right there with them, Mars Hill. But I expect them to again have another banner season. I think that program is solid, the culture is solid, and they brought in a guy that has proven obviously he can win. So,
what's their recruiting base, Eric? Where do they get players? How do they retain them? Because in the world that we're in right now, with name, image, and likeness, and the transfer portal, you gather good players. It's hard to keep them at that level. So what's their base?
Well, David Glenn did a great interview with Coach Jacobs last year, right before their Final Four berth, and he said they draw a 500-mile circle around Hickory, and then they expand out from there, and they kind of look for maybe the diamonds in the rough. They look for the guy who maybe he's a player, he's a dog, but he doesn't have the size that maybe a D1 person would would attract the bigger programs, and they roll the dice on them, and they've hit a lot, and so that's a tribute to them. I think when you see guys go up to the yeah,
the ability to identify talent is the most, in my humble opinion, of 50 years of coaching and 40 years of being in Division I in pro football. The ability to identify talent is critical. My daughter and my wife can tell you what a great player looks like, but the guy that's the guy that has great ability but does not have great stats or great numbers, that turns into an outstanding player. That's how you judge, in my humble opinion. That's how you judge who a good football coach is, and that's how you judge how a good talent evaluator is.
Right.
Is to find those type players like that. Hell, it's not hard to find a 5-star. Those 5-stars stand out quick.
Let's talk about the Fabulous 15. Now, as we said, North Carolina actually has 35 college football programs. One of those, St. Augustine's, is not playing in 2024. So we will be ranking on a weekly basis 15 of the 34 active college football teams in North Carolina. That includes 14 teams in Division I, both FBS and FCS, the former 1AA. That includes 14 teams in Division II, 5 Division III teams, including my Guilford College Quakers, 1 NAIA team, and 1 junior college team. And I think before we get into maybe the top 5 of the Fab 15, and we'll put these all online at ncsportsnetwork.com, Eric, I want to ask you, who are some of the teams that you can tell Coach and I about that you feel could really be a surprise to people here in 2024?
Well, if you want to go back to the D2 ranks, we talked about Lenoir-Rhyne. They've got a conference partner, Wingate. They kind of was in their shadow last year. I think they've also had a coaching change, but they promoted from within, got their defensive coordinator, Sean Jordan. He's been there forever. He knows the system. They bring back an All-American defensive end, Marquise Fleming. They're a team I think that could move up the ranks quickly and be a surprise. And then in the FBS ranks, it's good to feel about East Carolina could make a jump up. They've got a very favorable schedule. They avoid a lot of the heavyweights from the American Athletic. They seem like they found their quarterback. They're happy with that. So, I put them in the Fabulous 15 to start with, just as, somebody that could be that surprise team. And I think they could surprise people at the end.
A lot of people are excited about North Carolina State this year and the magic that Dave Doran has brought back to the Carter over the last couple of seasons. Do you think this season does set up nicely for the Wolfpack to make a run? I mean, they have some pretty tough games, especially early on in week 2 over at Bank of America Stadium against the Tennessee Volunteers.
Yep, I actually have them first to start the year. Kind of the metric I use for the Fabulous 15, since we're ranking all the schools, how special a season either they're going to have or they have had, which is why Lenoir-Rhyne led the way last year. But yes, NC State is absolutely set up. This is kind of move the chips all in. They've mined the transfer portal very well. Coaching staff is back. I think, and again, the schedule is favorable. They dodge some of the teams that might get in their way. Typically, they don't have no Florida State, no Virginia Tech, no Miami. I don't think they play Louisville. So favorable schedule. And then, if anyone is due again for a break, it would be NC State. They got that in basketball. They kind of jumped over some hurdles, knocked down some walls. And so at least at this point, again, Clemson and Tennessee show up quickly on the schedule, but I think this team is set up for success. This is a year that, if you're in a Wolfpack red and white, I think you should be very excited about the year ahead.
And Jim, one of the things about NC State of late has been that they've been very good late in the season, but had some rocky times at the beginning or the middle part of the season. Now they get a quarterback that can really be a difference maker. At least he had been in the past at Coastal Carolina. We're talking about Grayson McCall. Yeah. Quarterbacks are great, but Jimmy, you and I were going back and forth. When you look at NC State, we know they have some talent in the pocket. We know they have a running back from Duke that has some pretty good chops as well. But what are they like up front? Because that was the difference this past weekend in Dublin when Georgia Tech kicked Florida State's in the trenches. I mean, they kicked the Seminoles from one side of Ireland to the other. They dropped the Blarney Stone on them. And I don't think anybody in ACC country was upset that Florida State fell down. But all kidding aside, does NC State have the chops in the trenches to deliver Dave Doran a special season in Raleigh?
Well, you know what, Mike, that's interesting. As you go through and you look at multiple teams in the ACC, especially, there's a lot of questions. And Eric, and I think you can probably comment on this also. There's a lot of questions in the offensive line with a lot of people across the league, so. I've been fortunate enough to be a part of a lot of championship football teams and be a lot of competitive teams, and we all know that skill positions and quarterbacks and receivers and that's the skill positions are all very important. But last I checked, you got to be able to block somebody and tackle somebody. And so I think that's the big question mark for not only the Wolfpack but multiple teams around the state. And I like the NC State coaching staff. They've been together for a while. They've won 9 games on multiple occasions. So I think they have the ability to as Coach Spurrier used to say, we need to coach them up. I think they have the ability to coach them up and be a really, really good football team.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. There's one thing about a Dave Doran team, you don't really worry about the physicality part. I mean, at that part, you don't have to worry. You really don't have to worry about the floor dropping out of a team that he coaches. Even last year, they were 4-3. They got, beat by Duke pretty soundly at Duke. Yeah. And, that was the part where a lot of teams would have just kind of been like, well, this is not our year. We'll just kind of cash it in. And they didn't. And, they pulled some magic out of their hats and went on a run and thumped Carolina. They were the physical team. That game, that was the last game my mom ever watched NC State play before she passed, and she loved it because they just put on a hurt.
You know what, Eric? What Coach Doran and that staff, they're what a longtime football coach would refer to. They're good old country ball coaches now.
Right.
And by that, I mean they do a great job coaching fundamentals, and they do a great job coaching physicality. And they're a physical team, and they're gonna do the things, and they're fundamentally sound. So if I were gonna rank, and I only have the ability right now, Eric, to rank the D1 teams, the FBS teams right now. But if I were going to rank those right now, NC State would be my number 1 at this point in time.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. Yeah, I think they're kind of far and away right now, number 1. You just know what you have. You've got App State and Carolina behind them. Duke, ECU, maybe the next tier. I think Charlotte will be better. There's something I really want to see because there's, the chatter is that this is going to be an improved team. They brought in some experienced coaching. Now once you start playing the games, that's when it really, that's when you learn. But I think overall the state will be better collectively. And I think right now the Wolfpack should be the team to beat in the state.
Well, you know probably better than I do, Eric. But if I were going to rank right now the FBS teams in our state, I would go NC State, App State, the Tar Heels, the Blue Devils, just because it's a new coach. Wake, Wake is a little bit of the unknown, but Dave Clawson does an outstanding job at Wake Forest. ECU, I think, is going to be better. So ECU could jump both Wake and Duke at some point in time, and so could Charlotte. But still, there's the unknown element that those teams carry. And so as a preseason deal, I've got to rank Duke and Wake both ahead of them.
Yeah, that's exactly what I've got. I've got ECU ahead of Duke, but that's one I kind of was iffy on. I feel good about your grouping too. I think that's fair. App State brings back experienced quarterback. They're being hyped as a potential group of 5. Can they make the playoff? Can they break through there? And they get a chance to play Liberty, which might be the one team that most people see as the team to beat. So they've got a chance to get a W in a head-to-head. So I would put them as 2, right now. Carolina's, they've been quiet. It's been quiet in Chapel Hill in the offseason. So it'll be very interesting to see what they actually do have, defense and a quarterback position.
Well, Eric, and you just said it right there. It will depend, in my opinion, my humble opinion, that how well they play at quarterback and how many times they have the ability to hand it to number 28.
Right.
Which I would hand it to number 28 a lot of times. Right. And then I would play action pass off handing it to number 28. Absolutely. And I would boot off handing it to number 28 because you better stop him and you better tackle him. And I think defensively the Tar Heels will be better. But we got to see, they've got a really interesting test to open the season at Minnesota this week. I look forward to seeing that, and we know that we're all looking forward to seeing that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're here, man. It's game week. After all the hype and all the talking season, we are here at game week, and so it's that time of year. It's Christmas here in NC Football News headquarters.
That is Eric Lusk. He is the publisher of ncfootballnews.com. Check out that website. And the Fabulous 15 this year is brought to you by the North Carolina Sports Network. Eric, we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot for taking time to be with us tonight.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
King Neptune Restaurant in Wrightsville Beach is the longest running restaurant in New Hanover County. That's since 1947. And it recently was renovated to an impeccable degree by our good friends Jimmy Galeese and his amazing wife, Keaton. Their outstanding chefs offer fresh local seafood, salad options, and creative, tasty variations of pork, beef, and poultry dishes. King Neptune has always been a great choice for dinner and or drinks, and now it's open for lunch and brunch too. Check out the lunch, brunch, and dinner menus at neptuneswb.com. That's Neptunes with an S, then WB for Wrightsville Beach. Again, the King Neptune Restaurant website is neptuneswb.com.
That'll about do us here on this edition of the fifth quarter. For Coach Collins, I'm Mike Waddell. Thank you for tuning in to the North Carolina Sports Network. A reminder that coming up later this week, it'll be David Glenn and Chris Edwards back as they take a look ahead for week 1 of the 2024 college football season. For the North Carolina Port Council and for Coach Jim Collins and our special guest, Eric Lusk of NCFootballNews.com, I'm Mike Waddell. We'll see you this weekend at the games.